Well, hello, LSU fans, and welcome into the Go 24/7 podcast. That is Glen West. My name is Bryce Koon. And for the final time for the college baseball season, or I guess, Glenn, we could probably put a bow on the college athletics calendar in 2024 2025. It's the LSU Tigers, the final team standing in Omaha as LSU wins their 8th national title. And Glenn, man, this was a fun one. This was a crazy game, too, that we got to watch, and just all the back and forth, the ejection early in the game of Coastal Carolina's not just the head coach, but the first base coach there as well. But man, obviously the big story is LSU wins title number 8, 2 out of the last 3. Jay Johnson, the youngest coach to ever reach 2 titles in college baseball history. Lots to talk about, man, and it kind of puts a bow on a 2025 season that maybe I take it all the way back here. Did you think we'd be sitting here when this team kind of broke for camp and got ready there in the month of February, starting to kind of loosen things up?
I don't think I did. I think I
Yeah.
thought this was a team that was capable of getting to Omaha. I think you look at the talent on this roster and you see the future pros that are going to be on it. But I'd be lying if I said that I thought that they would win the whole thing. And look, I'm endlessly going to be in awe is not the right word, but just very impressed by the way that this team was able to do this. Like, you kind of get jaded from a couple years ago because that team in 2023 was just so special, so uniquely talented, had some of the best college baseball players you'll ever see. Playing for that team. And, I think this team had some really good players on it. Some teams that obviously are going, some guys that are obviously going to play, pitch in the major leagues. Cade Anderson, Anthony Ianson, Chase Shores,
Mhm.
they're right there at the top of that list. This one felt a little bit more, you know, even earned is the wrong way to put it because they all championships are earned, but
Yeah.
this one felt like it had to take a little bit of extra mustard to get to the finish
Yeah.
line. And because there were some real deficiencies on this team that I think you saw crop up even in this championship series. I mean, look, let's put it bluntly, the offense only scored 6 runs in these 2 games. Like they did just enough, and that's been kind of their motto here over the last 1 or 2 months here. It's been
Yeah.
every time we've asked these players or Coach Johnson, it's like we just need a little bit more from these guys, and we're going to get to where we want to go. They
Yeah.
got just enough from them, and man, oh man, did Cade Anderson, Anthony Ianson, and then Chase Shores to close them out today. Did they put on a show for LSU these last couple of days? Really put the team on its back. Stephen Milam had obviously a great postseason, great College World Series. Is probably the MVP of the postseason for LSU. Jared Jones obviously had some huge knocks throughout the entirety of this postseason. When you look at what he was able to do in that Arkansas game, that they clinched them the chance to play for a World Series championship here. But you can't start anywhere but the pitching with this thing, man. I mean, those guys answered the bell time and time again. You didn't have to use Case and Evans at all in these 2 games. You didn't have to use some of your real elite top arms out of the bullpen over the last couple of days, and that just shows you how special those guys are. Whether it's Anderson, Ianson, or Chase Shores here getting those final 8 outs, 4 strikeouts, I believe it was. Those guys are the story of this College World Series finals to me.
Mhm.
And when you look at kind of the totality of the last couple of months of how this season has played out, those 3 guys in particular, and the way that they've kind of put the team on their shoulders, or on their arms, I should say, for a good majority of that run, it has a lot to do with how LSU got to this place.
Yeah, the broadcast showed a graphic of just some dynamic duos, and I guess one of the first ones that I remember, obviously, was that UCLA team about a decade and a half ago now, I guess it is, that had Trevor Bauer and Garrett Cole. And then obviously to
Yeah.
have, Cade Anderson and Anthony Ianson in that same conversation, man. It was one of the things we talked about a couple days ago, Glenn, when we previewed this thing. And it wasn't a slight at Coastal, but it was more about just preaching to what the strength of this LSU team had. And that was a number one and number two that probably are more 1A, 1B, really, when you
Yeah.
kind of get into that conversation. And we just didn't know if Coastal had faced anything like that. And you started to kind of dive into the numbers. I mean, Coastal was not great with runners in scoring position. They weren't great when they got opportunities. And I think it speaks to the mental fortitude of those two young men in Anderson and Ianson, who, like a guy going back to game one in Anderson, didn't have his best stuff,
No.
early on. And that was something Kyle Peterson talked about, post game, but just kept battling. And that was what makes him a candidate to go, maybe 1-1 next month when we get ready for the MLB draft. Anthony Einson, same thing, a guy that traditionally has struggled kind of early on and then gotten better and stronger as the game went on. And then, those two guys deserve the praise, man. Chase Shores over the past month and a half has just, I don't know what the kid's future is the next level. Jay Johnson said post game, 18 months from now, or 24 months, 18, 24 months from now, you could see both of those guys playing, in the major leagues, all three of those guys.
All three of them, yeah.
I don't know if Shores is going to be a starter the next level, but man, even if he develops just a third pitch really with the fastball and the slider, in back end of the bullpen, he's going to get a shot somewhere, to be that. And he has settled in so nicely to that role. And man, I just, you've already talked about the pitching, and I just wanted to kind of harp on that because I think it was really, really impressive just to see what those guys did. And it kind of went with the moniker of I came into the series with, Glenn, your stars had to play like stars, and they did. They performed. And I thought it was funny. I wanted to ask you this. They kept saying on the broadcast, and, Jay Johnson will probably never say anything until after the fact because that's just the kind of person he is. I'm glad he didn't have the in-game interview when they were talking about this, or they didn't ask this. But if Jay Johnson had a script of how the final series should go, the broadcast said this, and I agree, it was followed to a T. I mean, I don't know if you could have drawn this thing up better. You get the complete game shutout from Cade Anderson, and then Anthony Ianson continues to work. I mean, Glenn, if you told Jay Johnson you're only going to use 3 pitchers and you're going to sweep the College World Series, he would have said, I need some of that stuff that you're on, because that's that is such a rare feat. And I think it speaks to this, the guys stepping up in big moments.
No doubt. I mean, the 3 pitchers are very deserving of all the hype that they're going to get following this series, championship series win, especially when you look at kind of how they got to this place in Omaha. Like,
yeah,
Anderson was fantastic in his first game, and then you flip it to the next day or the next game, I should say, and Ianson, they only get 40 pitches out of him. Like, he didn't have his normal, okay, you're going to throw 80, 90 pitches here in game 2 and we're going to win. He got shut down after 44 because of the weather delay, and everybody, I mean, at least kind of going after that UCLA game, it was like, man, how is LSU going to kind of reorganize things with their pitching staff to win not only the game against Arkansas, but also the next 2 games in the World Series if they're able to win that? And I think I think you put it best. The mental fortitude of this team, I think, has shown itself to be elite, and I think that is probably what, above all else, is why LSU won this championship. Not because they're not a really talented team. They are. They have some great players, guys that are going to go in the first 5-6 rounds of this thing here in the next couple of months or next couple of weeks. But just every time it seemed like that they, were going to hit a wall, or things looked a little bit down and out for them, they just kept fighting, and they were never out of games. And I think the best stat that really kind of just tells you that is the 1-run games. Like, LSU was in 11 or 12 1-run games going into the College World Series final. I believe their record was 8-3 or 9-3, something like that. And you win the 1-run game here against Coastal Carolina in game 1. They didn't really go away in game 2. Like, they were always kind of lingering, but at the same time, while Coastal Carolina was never really out of the game, it never also felt like LSU was out of control of the game. Like, they always felt like they were in control. And I think a lot of that has to do with who was on the mound and the guys that were pitching for them. You never really felt like, oh, even after that 2-run homer from Ianson, like, yeah, this it maybe gets a little shaky, but you never felt like, oh, this is going to get completely off the wheels. And certainly it didn't there with what Shores was able to give him for the last 8 outs. But I think what we have to also point out here too is that in addition to the pitching, LSU played some damn good defense, man.
Oh, man.
They were Jay Johnson was telling us, a month and a half, 2 months ago, about how the defense was not being talked about enough with this team. And man, oh man, did those guys really show out, especially in the infield with Dickinson, with Milam, with Braswell. I mean, talk about a great story for that guy to, be struggling like he was at the plate, but to make all those plays that he did in Saturday night's game to help LSU win that 1-0 victory. Come back today, plays more great defense, gets on base a couple times in the final game as well. I think he exemplifies a lot of what this team has been about. It's toughness,
Mhm.
it's sharp minds, toughness. I believe I can't remember exactly what the quote is that Jay uses, but they have symbolized what a Jay Johnson team is. And I think when you hear Jay Johnson after the game talk about how LSU winning this championship is a little bit even more fulfilling in some ways than the one that they got 2 years ago, I think that's what he's talking about. Like he
Yeah.
means like the identity and the core mindset of this team is exactly what he wants in every team that comes and plays at LSU. And so the defense certainly deserves a shutout. We find out in the post game that Dickinson has been playing on a broken hamate bone in his hand since the regional. I mean, how many
Crazy.
big plays has he made in the postseason defensively and at the plate too? He's had some big time swings in at West Virginia's super regional and certainly in Omaha as well. Like, I mean, there's just a toughness about this group that I think is the main reason why they got here. They have talent, but it's the ability to not get thrown off, not to be shaken by a bad bounce or a bad hit going your way or going against you. That this team has been able to really kind of overcome, and that's a really good and cool core identity to have as a group, and why I think it'll be remembered as one of the better LSU teams of all time.
Yeah, I like what you said there because we've asked Jay Johnson this multiple times this year, and he's very careful with his words, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I do think this means a little bit more in the way they did it, right? Like that 2023 team, Glenn. I mean, that was my first year covering LSU. Obviously, you've been around LSU for a while now. You, I don't want to say you expected it, but they had the star power. Like they had the superstar power. And look, and Jay Johnson said this in the post game on ESPN. He said, like, there's major leaguers on this team, but this was such a collaborative effort of everyone having to pitch in. I mean, you even mentioned a couple guys there. I'm going to go back, like Chris Stanfield. I mean, that is a guy who I don't know what his pro outlook is, but by my God, when we talked about him and Glenn, that was a guy I was really high on, coming into the season for me personally. This was one of the more consistent contributors, and you knew what you were going to get out of him, and it was really solid defensive play. He made a couple nice, grabs with some crazy wind out there today. But just that 2-run single that he had, and just being able to pass the bat back, and that was something like people on our message board have been very critical of that all season. But man, over the, I think it's just the way that they did it makes this a little bit different, a little bit special. They've got Kate Anderson, who's probably going to be a top 8, top 10 pick at least. But there's not really a Dylan Cruz on this roster. There's no Paul Skeens. It's a lot of really good baseball players doing their job collectively, and it kind of feeds into, and no, we are not a promotional avenue for LSU, but the whole moniker of the whole toughen together. And I think they really lived up to that. And that is one of the big themes that like you can see and say, yeah, that makes sense. Like it's not just a slogan to put on a t-shirt, right? Like they really embodied that. So I like what you said there with it there as well. Glenn, there will be tons of time for us to kind of, in the next months or so like that, to really kind of look at who's gone, who's coming back, and things like that. But, I listed Chris Stanfield. Obviously, you listed some guys there as well who are just, I guess some players that, man, that really contributed that you were just like, gosh, they played their role so well. I mean, I know we've talked about a couple of them. Dickinson comes to mind, and Case and Evans, we didn't get to see him, but my God, I mean, if they had to go to a game 3, you were going to feel good about it with Evans getting the
Yeah.
ball. I mean, maybe who's one or two other players that you're just like, they just filled the role so well for this team, and they're maybe they're not the big star names.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that there are certainly a couple of guys that come to mind like that. I think Ethan Fry is a
Mm,
guy that comes to mind, really. I mean, he, did not start the season off as an everyday player for LSU. He was very much in and out of the lineup, pinch hit here, pinch hit there, occasional start here. But by mid-April, he was like a fixture in this lineup where if you took him out, it's like, well, what are you doing? I mean,
yeah.
he played himself into a star role on this team, and he came up with such clutch hits for this team throughout the entirety of the season. Omaha was a little bit of a different story for him, I think, over the last 3 or 4 games, but I mean, this game in particular, game 2, goes 3 for 5, has an RBI swing, RBI double that tied it up there in the third inning after Coastal had taken that lead, and you saw the benefits of having him out there on the field and swinging the bat the way that he did. That was LSU's most I guess together 2 innings that they had the entire championship series was that third inning and that fourth inning today. Where they scored 5 runs in those 2 innings and really kind of created the separation. Ethan Fry was huge in that effort. Stephen Milam came through with some big time swings for him throughout the entirety of this postseason. I think that was probably the MVP performer, just in terms of the guy that, and I think we thought this coming in, like if there was a guy that needed to overperform or outperform where he maybe had offensively, at least for the majority of the regular season, it was going to have to be Stephen Milam. And boy,
Yeah.
he delivered. I think he hit over 400 in the postseason, or he was right around
Ridiculous.
400 in the
Yeah.
postseason. Just phenomenal kind of clutch gene execution there from him at the plate. But in direct reflection of your question, I do think that Ethan Fry is certainly one that comes to mind. I think Jake Brown, the Jake
Yeah.
Brown, Josh Pearson duo, just all the things that those guys had to endure in terms of not knowing who was going to be in the lineup on a particular day, and still just coming to work, toughness and together, team over me kind of thing. That's exactly what Jay Johnson's been preaching about for most of the season. So I would say those 2 guys certainly in the field. And look, the 3 guys obviously on the mound, with Shores and Anderson and Ianson and Evans, of course. But I think those 3 guys, the Fry, Milam, those kinds of players were right up there. And I think probably one that you've been talking about for a little bit, but Luis Hernandez. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
what a gift he's been in the postseason to play every single game and be that guy behind the plate. You're a former catcher, you know what probably that's like, and it's not easy, especially when you
Yeah.
have to also be asked to produce at the plate offensively.
Yeah. No, and we kind of go back 6 months, Glenn. They really didn't. I don't want to say they didn't have a catcher, but there wasn't like this de facto that this Luis is going to have the job, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, that there wasn't that. And yeah, no, I think just the way that he developed. I mean, look, let's be real. Like, beginning of the season, some question marks defensively, and would he hit enough to overcome that? And getting the season, and I mean, he's one of your, like you said, your de facto leaders. He had some big hits in Omaha. He had some big hits in the supers, big hits in the regional, and just it goes back to the common theme. And every question we ask on the show tonight probably does. Just a really solid group of baseball players, and when you have that, and you've got a good coaching staff, and man, that Nate Yeske guy, maybe he knows what he's doing out there with some of the things, and But when you have that, man, that's the makings of a championship team, and I just super impressed with that. Just really, really impressed. Another thing, Glenn, I wanted to hit on before we kind of get out of here, maybe last reflection here in a second, but you know, I go back to probably, and maybe I ask you this, and we can take it each way, but I was trying to think as the game was coming down to the wire, you're getting close in, and you have to think about where's the killer instinct, right? Like you give up the 2-run homer in game 2. It's 5-3. Coastal's got a little bit of life. And the killer instinct just to go out there by Chase Shores, you allow the leadoff runner on, and I mean, you just start mowing guys down. I mean, 100 with some sink, 100 with some run, 101. It's just ridiculous. And I tried to go back and think, when was the last, what was the turning point, or when did I see this team a little bit lifeless, to be real? And I go back because I was in the building when they were on the road at Auburn, and it was tough weather. And you mentioned earlier just like the mental fortitude to be able to overcome going on the road against a good team that made us hosted the Super Regional eventually. Maybe that was the turning point, but I just think the killer mentality really developed over the course of the season. That Tennessee series, the Jared Jones walk off. I mean, that just different things. So I guess what was a moment for you this season where you saw, or maybe you go back and you identify as that was a turning point? For me, it was that Auburn series coming out of it, understanding, okay, if we're going to be a championship team, speaking from the team perspective, weekends like that can't happen. I think that maybe been a little bit of wake up call. Was there a moment for you that you watched and said, okay, that might be a turning point, or they're starting to really realize who they are?
Yeah, I think probably for me the Tennessee series where you had the clutch late game antics there from Jared Jones and from all those guys. That was when you really got a sense of like, okay, this team is not going to be rattled by very much when they get into the postseason. But honestly, I think for me the series that just kind of keeps coming back into my mind from the regular season at least is the Arkansas series. I mean, that I think LSU and Arkansas were always going to be on a path to meet in the postseason. You didn't know when, and certainly when the brackets came out, it would have to be in Omaha. But I think those two teams, to me, when you look at just kind of how those games went in the regular season, and then certainly at the College World Series, those were the two most talented teams that played each other this year. And I think for me, LSU being able to navigate that first Arkansas game where they weren't maybe playing their best and they still are able to come through. I think that was the game that Ethan Fry in game one came through with the walk-off hit, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I am. But and then the very next day you come back and you run rule them and you take the series. And it's like, okay, LSU pretty much has kind of accomplished their first goal after that. I think they locked up the national seed by getting that series win against Arkansas. And so that's goal number one, right? You got to lock up a top 8 national seed. Road to Omaha has to go through LSU. I think once they kind of hit that, kind of benchmark throughout their 2025 season, that's when you really kind of had a chance to go like, okay, now how do you set it up the rest of the way to where this team can really kind of be the best versions of themselves? And it was kind of around that time when they started doing things like moving Chase Shores to the bullpen. They started really leaning into some of these younger arms. Cooper Williams was a guy who would come in for a couple outs here and there. Had a low ERA for much of the season, but they really started leaning into Cooper Williams down the stretch of the regular season. You had, obviously guys like Anthony Ianson really kind of catching on in the last couple months, really throughout the entirety of SEC play. Ianson was fantastic. You could flip a coin between whether it was him or Anderson that was the best pitcher on the staff. And boy, is that a good place to be in if you're LSU. Yeah. I think we all kind of thought like, those two guys could carry you, but so far, and you needed to have kind of those extra guys really step up from a pitching perspective. And for me, I mean, obviously what Chase Shores was able to do over the final month of the season, I think you saw him start to get some confidence in the series against Arkansas, South Carolina, SEC tournament. He had some good outings and then was able to carry that over, obviously, into the postseason. So I think the Arkansas series for me was a turning point for this team in terms of this is a really good team. This is a team that has the potential to get to Omaha, to flipping it to be, okay, this is a team that should expect to be in Omaha. And when they get there, how far can those top guys carry you from a pitching perspective? And we learned pretty quickly here that they could lean on a couple of those arms and they would be just fine in terms of their postseason run.
Derek Curiel was phenomenal.
Can you imagine how good he's going to be next year? I mean, that dude's going to be All-American, All-SEC, probably a top 10 pick. I mean, the thing that stinks is you got the championship, right? But you only get him for 2 years. And you trade that off 100 times out of 100, but it's like, dang, this guy was a 3-year player, man. We're talking about rarefied air, I think, in terms of the players that he would be compared to. And he still very well could be. I mean, like, he could have a phenomenal season next year and be in that conversation of Bregman and Cruz and all those top, position players that have come through here over the years. But you still would love to see him for 3 years, but I have a feeling he's going to be gone after 2. So you got to enjoy him while we can.
2025 is going to be a fun year. 2026, I should say, I guess, technically. But, man, what a run. What a fantastic run for this team and a fun season covering LSU baseball. The Tigers win championship number 8, and we appreciate you for tuning in all season long to our baseball podcast, all the coverage over at Go 24/7. Make sure you go and take advantage. Get yourself a VIP subscription. Hang out with us on the message boards and subscribe to all those podcast feeds. It's been a blast here in 2025. And LSU wins 2 out of last 3. And Glenn, maybe what's the next one? You know, time for 9. Like what are people going to call it? Time for 9. I don't know. We got to come up with something. So
There's some pretty popular 9s in the past history of LSU sports. So maybe something in regards to Burrow, maybe something in regards to I don't know.
it's a good one. We got to get on it.
We can figure it out. We got some time. I mean, we've got a whole year until we get back to. I mean, I think I tweeted out 8 is great, and then there was a whole bunch of 8 is greats coming out afterwards, and that was pretty cool. So, yeah, look, this has been a great the 2025 season. I think now what you kind of really look at and with the conversations you can start to have is dynasty and what kind of dynasty is Jay Johnson going to be building here in Baton Rouge? Because you mentioned it there right on the offset. 2 championships in 4 years. I believe you said he's one of the youngest coaches to ever accomplish that feat. He's building a powerhouse in Baton Rouge. Like, these guys are going to be really good for a long time with that guy at the helm. And, might not win it every year, but you're going to give yourselves a lot of cracks at Omaha to give yourselves some more championships here. And look, will he ever be, in that, kind of Skip Bertman kind of, Hall of Fame, he's already a Hall of Fame coach. I don't mean to say that, but just the upper echelon of the sport. You still got a couple more rings that you probably got to go get, and I think he's very capable of doing it. And I think LSU fans should be sleeping happily at night, that knowing that their baseball program is in the hands of Jay Johnson. I think he is exactly the kind of guy that is going to be able to build this thing up and make it and take it beyond to where it's already been, and really kind of carry this thing into the modern era of college athletics and college baseball.
I think the best way to end it right here is to talk about a good time in LSU athletics. Ross Dellinger, Yahoo Sports. Glenn, I don't know if you saw the tweet, but he's familiar with what's happening down at LSU. He got some ties. He goes, the Bayou's been cooking up some championships since 2019. Obviously, the 2019 football team, the 2021 men's outdoor track. In 23, you had women's basketball and baseball. And then 2024, you had the women's gymnastics team. And then 2025 baseball. So, trophies making their way back to Baton Rouge, and we'll have some great coverage later this week.
I think it's time for another football one. It's just my own.
Yeah, personal. Booking it with football. How about men's basketball, Glenn? What are the betting odds?
I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it. Talk about overextending the I don't know. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. We'll see. I think they'll be better, but how much better is good in the SEC next year is going to be the big question for men's basketball.
I'm going to let Glenn take a 1-hour-long podcast in about a month just on men's basketball to answer everyone's questions. That'll be his job right there.
Yep.
Hey, we appreciate everyone for watching and tuning in all season long. Like we said, we'll have coverage from the celebration that'll be obviously happening on campus here later this week. Dates still to be confirmed there of when the team's going to get back in town, but I'm sure Tiger fans will know, and they'll show out in full force there as well. So we appreciate everyone watching. That is Glen West. My name is Bryce Koon, and this is the Go 24/7 podcast.